Nature is made possible by public television stations, your gas company, and America's gas industry, supplying natural gas across this land of ours, providing gas energy to fuel industry, warm homes, heat water, and cook meals for over 160 million people from coast to coast.
A glass of orange juice in the morning, a cup of coffee, a cotton napkin, so common that most of us don't even give them a second thought. But like so many things we take for granted, there are stories of intrigue, exploration, and dedication behind most of the plant products that are part of our daily lives. Hi, I'm George Page for Nature. This orange juice probably came from oranges grown in California or Florida. But the orange is not native to the United States. It originated in the Far East and was not brought to North America until the 16th century. The coffee may have come from plantations in Brazil or Colombia, but the original coffee trees were natives of Ethiopia. They were domesticated by the Arabs and introduced to India, Ceylon, and Java before finally coming to the Americas. In the last few centuries especially, botanists have scoured the planet, looking for plants to clothe us, feed us, cure our diseases, and support new industries. Man could not survive without plants. But before plants can be of use to man, he must first find them. Today's familiar suburban garden may have flowers brought together from all corners of the world. But in the 17th century, many of these flowers were yet to be discovered. Instead, intricately planted gardens of hedges and herbs, called knot gardens, provided peace and tranquility. Gardens are a reflection of their times and of the plants man has found to grow in them. As time went on and the world became better known, explorers, plant hunters, who worked for botanic gardens, wealthy patrons, or nurserymen, sent back blossoms, trees, fruits, and vegetables from all over the world. The world's botanic gardens still collect seeds and plants, but the concerns today are very different. Now the search has a desperate urgency about it, because the wild plants are vanishing. Dr. Peter Raven is director of the Missouri Botanic Garden.
With 250,000, 250,000 kinds of plants in the world, the first question that anyone might ask is, why would you care? It seems plenty. After all, we get 90% of our food, either directly or indirectly, from about 20 kinds of plants, and we get over half of our food from just 3, corn, wheat, rice. Seems the other 250,000 might be safely neglected, but that's wrong. Worldwide, we're faced on all sides with the loss of options because we're losing plants. Plants are what support our lives. And as we lose them, some 10%, about 30,000 species, are in risk within the next 20 to 30 years. As we lose them mostly passively because we're not really working with them. Our children and grandchildren are going to have a lot fewer options with which to support their lives and improve the quality of those lives.
For the people of Nepal, the future has already arrived. Lying between the vast lands of India and Tibet, its plunging valleys and towering mountains are an ecological time bomb. One of the few men who has taken on the lonely task of recording its native flora is Dr. Tertu Shrestha.
Data was very interesting to me. In my last trip in 1971, that is to say 15 years ago, I thought that this ridge could be set aside as a rhododendron reserve. We saw a lot of rhododendrons there. And this time I was rather shocked. The place where I wanted to see most of the rhododendrons were all gone. That was at 9,500 feet, 10,000 feet. So the whole morning we walked without seeing any plant. All we saw there in the slope was these mutilated bushes of rose, some berberries, and some teucrium plants in little clumps. But it was all bare, you can't really imagine that it was the same spot. So we have to go a bit further, about 2 hours, way up in the mountains.
The Himalayas have given us many wonderful flowers, but it's not just the wild parents of our garden flowers that are at risk here. When the forests go, all other living things they support go as well.
Came to a real forest, and we did find good flowers like magnolia.
Collecting specimens of this viburnum and making notes about the plant and its habitat provide a permanent record which is added to the evidence. Evidence used to persuade agencies and politicians that urgent action is needed. Many plants are found in abundance locally and seem in no particular danger. But the field notes tell a different story to scientists thousands of miles away. Dr. Shrestha's research about what still lives is also a record of what has been destroyed. The Lalligurus, or Rhododendron arboreum, is Nepal's most spectacular flower. It can grow into a tree 80 feet tall. In 1962, it was made the national flower. Now, often only single, isolated trees remain where once great forests covered the hillsides as far as the eye could see. Experts give these forests just another 10 years. By then, parts of Nepal will be as bare as desert. Travel is difficult for the botanist. Unspoiled forests lie in remote places, far from roads. Steep paths along high ridges drop to deep valleys. In some areas, monsoon rain is measured not in inches, but in feet and yards. In country like this, the number of expeditions one man can make is limited. The acquisition of knowledge takes time. This wild specimen of Rhododendron cinnabarinum will be filed back in Kathmandu. In a few years' time, the museum record may be all that remains of the forest. The rest will have gone.
So I think it was all mainly the impact of the recently built road. And the impact I saw was terrible. The road was there, but the plants have all gone.
New roads are under construction everywhere. They now penetrate valleys that only a year ago were remote. Roads are a symbol of development in the Third World. But unless they're built as part of an overall plan that protects the forest, roads can bring disaster as well as benefits. Sadly, this is seldom done. The road attracts settlers, and then trees are cut down to build houses and provide firewood for cooking and heating. For people living at a bare subsistence level, the chance of earning more than $1 a day breaking rocks is undreamed of wealth. Once again, the battle lines between man and the environment are drawn. It's a war neither the plants nor the people can win.
And the water resources, for instance, in Hire, there were only 2 or 3 shops and few houses, but now it is a bazaar. And for water, we have to go, 300 feet, 400 feet way down before you could get some water. I just asked our Sherpas, where and how did you get water? They said that they went way down 700 feet and waited for 2 hours to get a tin full of water, say 4 gallons. So the loss of water, the loss of vegetation is the direct consequences of this road construction. So I think if the construction is not, tied up with the conservation programs, I think we are not going to have a very good future for our next generations.
We can still enjoy these plants in the wild, but our children may never know the experience. It's reassuring for us at home to enjoy our productive gardens and lush public displays of tropical plants. But it's easy to be deceived. At Missouri's impressive climatron, Dr. Peter Raven has wider concerns.
The world situation, of course, is one in which everything is indivisible from every other thing. Rapid population growth, which has doubled the number of human beings in the world in the last 35 years. Poverty, which is so extensive in the tropics that half the inhabitants of some of the countries are often on the edge of malnutrition. And a sheer ignorance about how we might collectively want to use the world's natural resources are combining to make a picture where the plants are being lost more rapidly than we're able to find them.
The Negev Desert in Israel. Over 5,000 square miles, it comprises more than a half of Israel's land area. Desert regions are inhospitable to man, but they are deceptive in their barrenness. Their plants have had to evolve cunning strategies and adaptations to survive the harsh conditions. Yet at the same time, deserts could be a productive source of plants for man's needs. One plant hunter who penetrates into deserts all over the world is James Aronson.
Deserts and semi-deserts cover over a third of the land surface of the Earth and support nearly 850 million people. In all of these areas, particularly in the subtropical belts, a tremendous need exists to find fuel, fodder, and food plants for these people, and at the same time to support and encourage conservation of the natural desert vegetation. What's needed are plants that are drought tolerant, salt tolerant, or both, and that have high economic potential.
Aronson's goal lies not so much in recording the plants as in assessing their usefulness to man and the chances of cultivating them. The speed at which desert plants are disappearing gives his work an importance which is only now beginning to be recognized by countries with the problem of expanding deserts.
Even here in the Negev, in my own backyard, people have been finding lately that a great number of plants have good potential that has been overlooked. People have been plant hunting here for thousands of years, but there's still good things to find. The superficial barrenness is deceptive. Plant exploration is still something badly needed, and I personally enjoy very much the business of hunting for plants in wild places that have yet to be altered or destroyed by mankind. Many things await discovery, and the hunt is exciting in and of itself. For myself, though, I like the seed collecting best of all. I feel that applied research is where I want to be concentrating my efforts, and you need seeds to do applied research. So rather than simply collecting herbarium specimens, I want to get seeds that can be later planted and grown to learn about how the plants can be used under cultivation.
Seed collecting isn't as relaxing as it looks. The plant hunter has to be in the right place at the right time if he's to find ripe seeds of endangered plants. Often it depends upon how good the rains were to make the plants flower. Sometimes it's a matter of luck, because ants and rodents can eat 90% of the seeds.
The joy for me is doubled. I get to do the plant exploration and collecting, be in wild places with all the beauty and the tranquility to be found there. And then, afterwards, I bring the seeds home and can grow them. That's a very rare combination.
Though Nepal's only botanic garden is small and its resources basic, it's still part of an international network, exchanging plants and information that link botanic gardens as far apart as Missouri and Kathmandu. Orchids are among the most vulnerable of the world's threatened plants, and the garden is conserving endangered Nepalese species. Laboratory techniques are used to raise new plants from small pieces of parent tissue. Once sufficient numbers are raised and the plants are large enough, they will be reintroduced to their native forests. Dr. Shrestha brings his new wild specimens to the garden's herbarium. As they're studied alongside older material, a full picture of the state of Nepal's flora slowly begins to build up. But the situation is not as easy as that. Already a backlog of over 25,000 specimens are awaiting identification. Often, difficult species can only be identified at a major institute, such as the New York Botanical Gardens. Shrestha is only too well aware that changing conditions in the wild are already overtaking the recorded information. The limited knowledge he and his colleagues have on hand is quickly out of date.
I think right now what we should really do is to go to the remote areas. Remote means, in 8 days trek or 10 days trek to the inner valleys of the Himalayas and make a inventory of the things available there. And then we should be able to categorize the plants, whether they are on the verge of extinction or whether they are used heavily by the people.
Picturesque as this village is, its construction destroyed a rhododendron forest. There were other consequences. Though this Coelogine orchid is considered common and widespread, Shrestha cited only 2 of the plants in 3 weeks. It takes years for orchids to colonize a tree, but only 15 minutes to cut it down. As the old trees come down, so do the orchids, ferns, and all other plants that grow on the branches. When the forest is gone, monsoon rains wash away the soil that trees once held in place. Miles from where the protective forests are disappearing, catastrophic floods and many deaths are the result.
So the problems in the mountain ecology has come from the human interaction with the vegetation. The pressure of the population is the main cause of deforestation. And then this deforestation leads to other ecological problems. So all the problems start with the people. And the people are again put under heavy pressure from economic side. The poverty is the main cause that pushes the people into the forest, to go into the forest, to have firewoods, to have fodder, all these things.
We're losing plants at an alarming rate. 25 or 30,000 species may disappear within the next 20 or 30 years. Here at the Missouri Botanical Garden, we keep our plant specimens in compactor units like these. We keep them in units like that to save space. What those individual specimens look like is this. They're dried portions of the plants with flowers, leaves, fruits, or other parts that are useful for identification and study. By reference to a great collection like this, scientists can learn where the different kinds of plants occur in the world, what they look like, when they flower, and many other things about their features.
They're sewed on so nicely, you have to take them off.
A lot of the specimens that we're adding to our herbarium here at the present time come from the North and South American countries of Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. If we want those plants to play a role in the economic development of the countries or the economic development of tropical countries generally, it's very important that we get somebody down there to work with them, see them, and study them while there's still time. We get our people down where the action is, we work with the plants in the field, we come to know them, and we try to bring the properties that those plants have to general attention so that the plants can be very useful. This specimen, for example, was collected by an anthropologist in Amazonian Peru. He found that the native peoples there were using an extract to cure inflammation of the eye. By comparing notes with other people working in other parts of South America in the range of this vine, which grows up in the trees in the forest, it was found that this is a standard use of it. Does that mean it may be a useful medicine for treating eye inflammation in the developed world? Perhaps. At any rate, it's a clue worth investigating. Discoveries are being made all the time. 20 years ago, for example, if you had a child who had the misfortune to contract Hodgkin's disease, a childhood form of leukemia, that child had about a 9 out of 10 chance, tragically, of dying. If you take the same child now, thanks to drugs that have been produced from the Madagascar periwinkle, a plant that's native only on that island off the coast of Africa, but which is cultivated widely, these drugs that have been developed now give that same child a 4 out of 5 chance of living. A big difference, and a difference made by a wild plant. One that wasn't even suspected of being useful more than 20 years ago. By the same token, in the mountains of Mexico, some 8 years ago, scientists found a wild relative of corn or maize, a perennial wild relative. But this plant occurs only in an area about the size of a football field. The people who live in that part of Mexico are busily cutting the trees, harvesting the forest, working on the vegetation, and as a result of their efforts, they could easily exterminate this plant even before it was known. Yet this plant, found only in that one tiny field in Mexico, is interfertile with maize, and when crossed with it, can confer resistance to the major virus diseases that reduce the yield in one of the world's most important crops. It could have disappeared without our ever knowing it existed.
At his institute in Beersheba, James Aronson raises over 1,000 new introduced plants each year. Returning from an expedition, he's eager to see how plants he brought back from earlier trips are growing.
This is an adenium and an aloe species from Kenya, and a sedum from America. And this here is Conocarpus lancifolius, which is a big tree which grows in dry riverbeds in northeast Africa and provides great quantities of fodder and firewood to people there. It has been grown in a couple of places, but never tested or selected for its real potential. We're going to be growing it in several places in the Negev in the next few years. This here is an oilseed plant that somebody sent me recently from North Africa. Here, these are cacti from South America, which yield some of the biggest and best tasting, attractive fruits of any cactus that we hope may be the basis for an export industry of a new fruit and processed fruit industry in the future. They're enormous things. I had to knock down the fruits off the top, and the birds had eaten most of them, but we got a few seeds, and now we're going to have several hundred plants to try in our introduction plots. And I think it has great promise as a new subtropical fruit crop for export. This is from Mexico. I was in Mexico a few months ago and found this ficus species growing on boulders right in the harshest part of the desert, which has this unusual trunk on it. Farmers in the desert could grow this under simple conditions in a shade house and export the pot plant to Europe. Could be an important source of income for those farmers.
Plants are taken from the greenhouse to the nursery and grown until they're big enough to plant out for trial.
I brought these tamarind trees back from India last year. They are a huge shade tree which also have a useful edible nut. We're planting them now in introduction plots in the Arava Valley. And this is a fruit tree from northeastern Africa, which I got this year. It grows in dry riverbeds and yields tremendous quantities of some of the best tasting fruit in Africa. It's never before been cultivated, and we're going to try to domesticate it as an orchard crop. We don't know yet whether or not it's salt tolerant, but we'll quickly find that out.
New commercial crops for Israel and new food and fuel plans for the Third World are urgent needs. As Israel develops the arid desert, ornamental trees and shrubs are also needed to make harsh country more pleasant to live in. Pioneers in the desert kibbutzim know it's not enough simply to make the desert an attractive place to live in. It's essential to make the desert productive. On land never before cultivated, dates now grow for export. The practice by pioneer colonists of introducing new crops into new lands has a long history and far-reaching consequences. Tea into India, bringing with it mass migrations of labor. Sugar into the Caribbean, sustaining a slave economy. Cotton into America, followed by more slaves and a new social system centering around great plantations. 18th century explorers like Sir Joseph Banks began an extraordinary search for plants. The plant hunters were remarkable characters, adventurers, missionaries, gardeners, scientists, who faced disease, drowning, bandits, hostile Indians, and revolutions while making dangerous and mostly solitary journeys way beyond the frontiers of their civilizations. Some did not survive the hazards, but all sent back plants, seeds, and specimens to their sponsors and to scientists like Joseph Hooker, an early director of England's Kew Gardens. Some are known for the ornamental plants they introduced, while others are less likely to have been heard of, such as Dutch-born Frank Mayer. He concentrated on economic plans for the United States Department of Agriculture, and his work is now worth billions of dollars annually to American farmers. Although unsung, the early plant hunters are not forgotten. Masson in South Africa, Douglas in North America, Cunningham in Australia and New Zealand, Spruce in South America, Ernest Wilson in China. Wilson collected first for a London nurseryman and later for Harvard's Arnold Arboretum. There's hardly a garden in England or America without a Wilson introduction. All their names are familiar to enthusiastic gardeners. In England, Kew Gardens has excelled both as a pleasure garden and in the transportation of plants around the world. Seeds of the rubber tree were shipped from Brazil to Kew, where they were sown. Shortly afterwards, almost 2,000 seedlings were on their way to develop the great plantations of Malaya. The quinine tree was sent via Kew from South America to India. As a treatment for malaria, it enabled Europeans to survive in the tropics, and therefore helped create colonial empires. In Kew's herbarium, the accumulated work of generations of plant hunters and botanists is represented by over 5 million preserved specimens. This vast collection serves scientists from all over the world and is the center of Kew's own research into the naming and classification of plants. It's sobering to think that we don't even know how many species in this collection are now extinct. Of the lovely Franklinia shrub, America has only its portrait on a postage stamp and plants in gardens. It was discovered in 1756 in Georgia by farmer botanist John Bartram, but no one thought to protect it. Within the short span of 38 years, all the wild plants were extinct. Bartram's house and garden have survived as a museum. He did more than anyone else in the 18th century to enrich American and European gardens. Now his home and nursery on the Schuylkill River is surrounded by downtown Philadelphia.
Most of the plants that we have in cultivation, the ones that are really important, are ones that our ancestors brought into cultivation thousands of years ago. They weren't worried about what a modern industrial society needs. They were rather worried about what the women could grow around the camp easily, what they could get the most return from. But we have a lot of other needs for plants now, not just producing grain or food, but producing medicines, producing oils, producing chemicals of various kinds, all the things that go up to make our society run. Scientists all over the world are looking for new kinds of plants from which to get these products. And then here's a letter from Skvortsov in Moscow. He says he's sending us some books.
Capabilities vary enormously from country to country for research into vital plant resources. Institutes like Missouri raise funds to put scientists into places where they're most needed. But there are not enough centers that work the way Missouri does. Most botanists remain in the developed countries. Countries with many thousands of threatened plant species, mostly in the Third World, have far too few botanists. Another major concern of Dr. Shrestha is Nepal's rapidly diminishing supply of wild medicinal plants. The country can ill afford to buy its drugs from the West, so there's a crucial need to produce essential medicines locally. Using what limited facilities they have, they're converting plants into concentrates to sell at home and abroad for much-needed foreign currency. At the same time, they're trying to find new medicinal plant crops. At the Botanic Garden, Nepal's wild medicinal plants are test-grown to find which could be cultivated by farmers. Indian valerian for the treatment of nervous disorders, and ephedra for respiratory problems. Some 40% of the world's drugs come from wild sources or synthesized from a wild derivative. In Nepal, aracema is used for curing colic in sheep and killing worms in cattle. Supplies are secure since it spreads rapidly when forests are cut back, as long as cattle don't eat it. But it's unusual for plants to spread. Many of the medicinal plants die when they lose the protection of the sheltering forest. They're becoming rare or lost forever before science has had time to synthesize the valuable properties they may hold. Most people in Nepal are treated by doctors and clinics practicing traditional medicine. Their cures are mostly based on the use of wild plants. Although slower acting than modern Western drugs, they can be effective. Western doctors in Kathmandu recommend the Ayurvedic treatment as effective for hepatitis. But even as this type of medicine becomes fashionable in the West, in Kathmandu they're having problems replenishing old stock. Increased demand has led to increased collecting of wild plants from a decreasing habitat. The traditional drugs derived from wild plants may hold great promise, but if the plants are lost, we will never know what cures they may have offered.
This is called kushta. Koot, yes. It is called koot in local language. It has got a smell and very effective for respiratory trouble, and we are making very important medicine out of this.
We can't get it now in
No, we can't get. Moreover, I would like to show you for difficulty we are facing nowadays. This is called yanchita. You call it...
Coptis tita, I think.
Coptis tita, right. Coptis tita, previously we were getting plenty, but now it's very hard to get it. And we are facing very difficulty.
Belladonna has many medicinal uses, from laxative to relaxant to heart stimulant. The drug can be processed from locally grown plants in Nepal. The introduction of the plant is part of an international process. Belladonna seeds were sent to Nepal from the Chelsea Physic Garden, the old apothecary's garden in London. It's a new cash crop for the local farmers, but there still remains the problem of persuading them to take on an untried crop alongside their traditional ones. The situation is very different in Israel, where farmers are on the telephone each week to James Aronson asking what new crops there are to try out.
Yeah, but at Meota Kikar, they all fell apart within a couple of months. The Ciruelo's looking good.
Yeah, well, all of them have new leaves.
Look at that. They're growing beautifully. This is just in the last couple of weeks, isn't it?
Yeah,
The
it
new
started
growth?
sprouting about 1st of March, I'd say.
Good. I want to take some cuttings of these today.
Okay.
and try and root them in the nursery so we can get some more. I've written some letters asking for more seeds of them too, but if we can make cuttings...
Well, could we take the cuttings off the bottom? Because
Yeah.
I thought maybe we should trim it up a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know. The tree in Mexico is sort of spreading like this. It goes out and up. There's a lot to it. Let's take this branch down about here.
Okay, undo this.
Under the side shoot.
Aronson gets his hands on every plant he can from the dry regions of the world and has a go at growing them. To help find out the conditions best suited to his new introductions, a network of volunteer gardeners all over the country put his plans to the test. Trials range across a variety of soils, rainfall, and temperature before they go into commercial production.
Again in 2 weeks.
The jojoba plant has become fashionable. Its oil is a substitute for sperm whale oil, and using jojoba in cosmetics and industrial processes could well help protect a species. Painstaking selection over the years is now giving high-yielding plants whose seed is much in demand by desert farmers. Another success story is the pearly blue bush. Originally introduced from Australia as a cattle feed, it has turned out to be far more profitable as a decorative foliage. Around 7 million cut branches worth $1 million are exported annually to the florist of Europe.
1,500 years ago, the Nabateans were cultivating the slopes and the wadis in this area through harvesting rainfall that hit the surrounding slopes. They channeled the water into concentrated areas in the lower spots and grew a variety of cereals, fruits, and other crops. In recent times, Professor Michael Levinari has reconstructed the ancient Nabatean methods of rainfall harvesting and has shown that it is possible to maintain a fairly decent subsistence level of agriculture in an area that only gets about 4 inches of rainfall a year. Today, he and I together are working on a project to apply these ancient methods to the cultivation of firewood in catchment basins enjoying runoff. In many, many parts of the world, firewood is the real energy crisis. People simply don't have enough wood to cook their food and heat their homes. We're interested in species that will regrow rapidly after being cut and harvested, so that it will be a perennial harvest rather than just a one-time harvest.
Slowly, we're acquiring the knowledge to enable us to live in balance with our environment, but it's taking a long time.
Obviously, development and conservation must go hand in hand. Only by increasing the lot of people and by creating the kind of situations in which they can find a measure of dignity and a measure of hope and expectation for themselves can plants, animals, or anything else be saved. There are so many people using the resources of the world so intensively that these two forces, development and conservation, must be linked. What we have to do specifically about the plants are to develop more knowledge about them, simply to learn what they are. There are so many of them, and our level of knowledge is so few that we simply don't have the basic resources that we need to act intelligently in most cases. Institutions, individuals who are exploring and looking for plants are developing the basis of knowledge on which sensible actions can be founded.
Seawater is abundant, but of little use in growing plants. There have been attempts to irrigate with seawater, but they have been met with failure. The plants simply curled up and died. However, saltbush, common around the world, is being grown and harvested on the coast of Israel, and it's been given only seawater, pumped straight from the Mediterranean. The implications are staggering for the drought-ridden countries of the world. Aronson and the Israeli scientists have taken this success a stage further. For the first time ever, sheep are being fed successfully on saltbush, grown only with seawater. Initial results show the animals are healthy and the meat unaffected. New Zealand spinach, grown on the world's coasts and watered by the sea, could provide many countries with a new green vegetable.
I think we need to prune out one of the main branches, and then we'll bring the others down.
New plants have to be found before we can take advantage of the unlimited seawater. Suitable candidates are not obvious. Simply because a plant grows wild by the sea and gets drenched with salt spray does not mean it can tolerate seawater irrigation. The trials are promising, and already a variety of plants are flourishing.
A number of people are active around the world today, exploring, collecting, and experimentally planting. Unfortunately, time is against us. Desertification is increasing, and many plants are being lost in the wild. Much of the germplasm that we'd like to collect is not going to be available in a few more years. So there's really a pressing need to increase the exploration and collecting as well as experimental planting in organized ways around the world.
The work of collectors like Aronson is important, but his job is only part of the whole question of plant survival. The world's supply of plants will no longer be available unless there's adequate planning.
Well, here in Nepal, we have quite a few national parks, but there is still a need to have more national parks, especially in the remote areas, in the Himalayan valleys, where agriculture is not that extensive yet. And similarly, we have to set aside some areas as national parks in the south of the Dhaulagiri area, for instance, where East Himalayan flora and the West Himalayan flora merge. Similarly, we have smaller special areas in the Himalayas where we have indigenous flora limited to that area. So such areas could be identified and set aside as national parks. But in fact, there is really little point just setting some areas as reserves while rest of the country is left to deteriorate. So there should be a sort of strategy for the conservation of nature and also for the development of the country. And for that, we have to send the message across the country to the people living in the area, saying that these are the valuable plants, and we must also tell them how to manage their natural resources. So I think what Nepal is really facing the problem is how to conserve the natural resources of Nepal, its plants, its animals, and all sorts of things, while the people, on the other hand, are facing the problem of fuel, the problem of firewood, the problem of food.
Again, the conflict between conservation and development. It seems almost overwhelming. But many successes around the world have shown that we can save the plants that save us.
Nature is made possible by public television stations, your gas company, and America's gas industry, developing new sources of gas energy and ways to use gas more efficiently for more than 160 million people across America.